Cobra is a 1986 platform game based on the film of the same name. It was developed and published by Ocean Software, and was released in Europe for Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64, C64, and ZX Spectrum. By 1990, it received a budget re-release. Cobra is a side-scrolling platform game based on the film of the same name. 6. The player controls Cobra, a cop who must rescue a model, Ingrid, from a villain known as the Night Slasher. The player must avoid various enemies throughout the game, including members of Night Slasher's gang, and people with bazookas. Cobra is initially unarmed and only has a headbutt as a defense. Weapons such as knives, pistols, and laser-sighted machine guns can be found inside hamburgers which are laying around in each level. The player can also duck to avoid attacks, and must jump over incoming prams. Gameplay takes place across 3 levels, a city, a rural area, and a factory. The player ultimately faces off against the Night Slasher in the factory. Another classic scrolling arcade game programmed by Jaffa Smith, who also coded Green Beret, and released by Ocean Software. This game came out towards the end of 1986 and was loosely based on the Sly Stallone movie. When I say loosely, I do mean loosely. Cobra was a scrolling, kill everything in sight arcade game that emphasized cartoony violence and humor. For a start, when you defined your keys, the menu said, "Push me," in reference to Sly himself, and the shoot key was labeled as murder. Funny stuff. Anyway, the aim of the game was to rescue a model called Ingrid Knudsen from the clutches of the Night Slasher and his evil henchmen and henchwomen. Cobra was a scrolling arcade game, with super smooth parallax scrolling, perhaps the best generated on a ZX Spectrum, and you ran either left or right. The bad guys would run in from both sides of the screen and attempt to kill you. To begin with, our Cobra had no weapon and you had to defend him with his bonds, by headbutting everyone with such force that they were sent hurtling across the screen. Weapons were hidden inside hamburgers, yep, and you could pick up either a knife, a pistol, or the rather cool laser-sighted machine gun, made famous in the movie. These power-ups only lasted for a certain amount of time though, represented by the slowly vanishing rubber duck at the bottom of the screen. Cobra was a tough guy, and dealing with knife-brandishing thugs and rocket-launching evil women didn't scare him in the least. However, the mere sight of a pram hurtling towards him made the poor guy go weak at the knees, and he was momentarily stunned if you didn't avoid the pram. Why prams were hurtling around the screen is anyone's guess. You had 3 lives to begin, represented by Rocky-style boxing gloves, within contact with any bad guys, or the knives they threw, rockets launched, etc., took one away, unless you were toting a weapon, in which case you lost the weapon and went back to headbutt mode. Even when it was game over, or game under, it did make you laugh as you entered your name in the morgue. Every now and again Ingrid would show up and run alongside you. This made you survive one hit from a nasty. Instead of losing a life, Ingrid would merely run away and would not appear again for a while. To complete the level, you had to dispose of every bad guy and use up every hamburger power-up. Once done, you would move to the next level. There were 3 in all, but I've never made it past level 2. Well, the movie of the same name had been pretty popular, and the game turned out to be too. It was well received, with gamers enjoying the parallax scrolling, excellent tunes, and the funny stuff. Magazines such as Crash raved about the game, and it was a deserved big hit. It was always nice for a movie tie-in to be worthy and not a quick cash-in. The test of time. Well, here in Spectrum Games we like a bit of Cobra. It is still playable and good for a laugh. The parallax scrolling is excellent and the graphics have the right cartoony style. It's bloody difficult though. Give this classic game a go. The gameplay is still there, but beware, it's not easy. We recommend getting hold of the real Sinclair hardware, but if not, then download a ZX Spectrum emulator. Alternatively, you could try and play it online. Cobra is a side-scrolling platform game based on the film of the same name. 6. The player controls Cobra, a cop who must rescue a model, Ingrid, from a villain known as the Night Slasher. The player must avoid various enemies throughout the game, including members of Night Slasher's gang, and people with bazookas. Cobra is initially unarmed and only has a headbutt as a defense. Weapons such as knives, pistols, and laser-sighted machine guns can be found inside hamburgers which are laying around in each level. The player can also duck to avoid attacks, and must jump over incoming prams. Gameplay takes place across 3 levels, a city, a rural area, and a factory. The player ultimately faces off against the Night Slasher in the factory. In the ZX Spectrum version, boxing gloves located at the bottom of the screen indicate the number of lives the player has, while a duck symbol gradually depletes as the player's weapon wears out. 7, 8. In the Commodore 64 version, snake heads are used to indicate the number of lives, and a hamburger icon represents the player's amount of energy. Some critics felt that the game was lacking in originality. Some compared the game to Green Beret, and some viewed it as a send-up of the film. ZX Computing wrote that the game stands up in its own right, perhaps because it bears so little similarity to the original film. Rachel Smith of Your Sinclair wrote that the game designers haven't taken the film quite so seriously as it took itself. Smith considered it one of the best film-based games available, and wrote that it isn't very original, but it's furious fun. 8. Jim Douglas of Sinclair User stated that Cobra is just what we all expected. Not great, it's pleasant enough, and not as disastrous as most license deals. Computer Gamer found few addictive qualities in the game and stated that it offers nothing special. Paul Bowden of Computer and Video Games considered the graphics and sound okay, but concluded it's the sort of game you've seen many times before. It will sell on the name rather than on the originality. Crash praised the graphics and music. 12. While reviewers for Zap 64 criticized these aspects and concluded that it was an unplayable, unoriginal, unprofessional, unimaginative, and unacceptable licensing travesty. Computer Gamer described the graphics as okay but nothing stunning, writing that the screen can end up looking very messy. ZX Computing described Cobra as a very fast, very well animated game, but stated that it was difficult to master at first because of an abundance of enemies. Chris Kane of Commodore User also considered the game difficult and concluded that it was pretty boring overall. Popular Computing Weekly considered the game professional enough in execution and quite fun for a short while, but stated that whether it would hold you long enough to get your 8 quid's worth is another matter. 1. ZX Computing wrote that the game would appeal to arcade fans looking for something a little bit different. 11. In 1987, it won the Newsfield Award for Best Platform Game. 6. Zap 64 reviewed the game's re-release and wrote that the unintentionally hilarious film got the game it deserved. Your Sinclair also reviewed the re-release and praised the graphics, while stating that the game may not appeal to most players because of its difficulty.